Shrink the Nation is a podcast for thoughtful, informed adults, preferably with a pour in hand. The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the hosts and guests only and do not reflect the views of any employers, institutions, licensing boards, government agencies, bourbon distilleries, or family members, especially our family members. They've asked us to be very clear about that. This show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said here should be taken as medical, psychiatric, legal, or professional advice. If you're in crisis, call a professional. If you're mad at something we said, we suggest journaling or emailing us with civility. We're here to challenge ideas, not diagnose strangers. We're clinicians, not your clinicians, and we have the bourbon to prove it. Let's go.
Pour something. I'll be quick. Marjorie Taylor Greene wants a national divorce. And after this past week in Washington, you can see why the fantasy sells. Government faceplant. Nobody shares the toys. This isn't politics. It's family court with better lighting. Same patterns. Triangulation, cutoffs, projection. We'd totally thrive if we didn't have to live with them. Cute story. Meanwhile, who gets the kids' future? Who keeps the flag? And who's stuck with the bills? Divorces aren't clean. They're expensive. And they tattoo the nervous system. America doesn't need a split. It needs differentiation. Adults who can hold values without turning neighbors into cartoons. Welcome to Shrink the Nation. All rise. I'm David. I've got my 20 plus in the military. I am a board certified psychiatrist. I haven't said this in a while. I'm the tech guy somehow.
We love spreadsheets.
I love spreadsheets. I still do. I'm back on the bourbon. I need it after this week, after the government is shut down and there's been nothing but blame and going across both sides. I'm doing it Jefferson's Reserve. And you know what? It is just fine for this occasion. So
it is. Hey, it's Rob, also a board certified psychiatrist, 25 years in, and lots of military time. This fine day, I'm doing some Irish coffee, but not with Irish whiskey. The last dregs of my horse soldiers, which I've meted out in a very cautious way. And excited to work off a little of the anxiety associated with a government shutdown when your entire life actually revolves around funding of the government. So I've got a little extra anxiety today. I think it's going to come out.
Hi, I'm Allison, have maybe 20 years of being a psychiatrist, 0 military experience, and I am drinking, again, my bespoke filtered carbonation home system sparkling water. If I get real wild, I might have my Trader Joe's Gone Bananas chocolate dipped bananas. Like if I go real wild, if I go bananas.
Gonna get crazy. Get loosey-goosey here.
I also like how you wear your lack of military experience with such pride.
You've put up with us enough that you feel like you climb a little bit.
I, in fact, am pretty proud that I didn't accidentally join up just by some surge of, because I was coming up at the time of 9/11, and I just feel really lucky I didn't get caught up in the surge of patriotism and accidentally join.
Wow, the opposite of stolen valor just now happened. Go fuck yourselves. So glad I didn't ruin my life.
Well, those of us in the military do not have the corner on patriotism. There's a lot of ways to be patriotic and to believe in the ideals of this nation other than putting on a uniform. So giving you a little trouble, but I absolutely can appreciate that you show your patriotism in a different way by putting up with us and doing the invisible work that is associated with that.
That's right.
And exercising my First Amendment regularly.
Which is absolutely patriotic.
And my 19th.
Loudly and unapologetically.
It was certainly Marjorie Taylor Greene. And this is not a red or blue reason that we're bringing this topic up. It's because it's psychologically relevant to the nation. And that's what we do. It's Shrink the Nation. We're talking about the psychology of the nation. But she's the one that brings this up the most often, by far. Now, other people have kind of retweeted or re-X'd or whatever they call it nowadays. Is it re-X'd?
I don't know that that's a phrase. Yeah, no, I think you just...
Okay. Well, I mean, it's no longer Twitter, so calling it a retweet seems a little silly. But at any rate, so there's others that have retweeted her call for an American divorce. And, you know, at its face, it feels ridiculous to me, but because it keeps coming up and it seems to get some psychological traction, I thought it was a really good topic for us to dive into because it strikes me as, you know, it's not shadow work. We talked about the shadow last time, and shadow work would be integrating the shadow. This is shadow surgery. This is proposing, we're just going to cut it out. And if we cut it out, we cut out all the pieces that we don't like, that what's going to be left is as vibrant and real and healthy and powerful as what exists before. And in fact, it's not even a consideration of will we be the same? It is a thought, we'll be better. If we can just slice off these pieces of ourselves that cause us some dissension, some anxiety, some cognitive dissonance, what's going to be left is more powerful, better. And I think it's worth chatting through.
Yeah, I'm still sort of struggling with how we're trying to frame this, even hypothetically, as the nation. At this point, are we sitting around a table and dad just called mom a whore and mom just slapped dad, and we're just sitting back and just really terrified and confused trying to eat our mashed potatoes, pretending like nothing's happening, and that's what's going on? Or are we trying to divorce ourselves? I'm kind of lost still.
I think in this scenario, mom is yelling about Jewish space lasers that caused wildfires. And I guess our dad in our heteronormative culture is just trying to keep food on the table and just trying to get the kids to daycare and or school.
Well, it's funny that you immediately put mom in the role of the bad guy.
Yeah, that's
because if I had done that, I have a feeling you would have called me out immediately for my
right.
biases.
Yeah, I would. The patriarchy has something to say about what you just said.
Do you mean Marjorie Taylor Greene, who talks about the Jewish space lasers as a tool of the patriarchy? Absolutely, we can talk about that. Like Taylor Swift said it best. What's
Forget the quote.
I forgot the quote. Rob, what's the Taylor Swift quote?
Yeah, Rob's the person to go to for the Taylor Swift quote.
I'm the Swiftie in this room.
Women like hunting witches too.
As it turns out, that when you tee up a quote and then you don't deliver, it kind of ruins the effect.
That's my job. That is my job. That's it.
If you want to tee up a quote for Taylor Swift, don't go to Rob.
Yeah.
Or me, to be honest.
I'm not the Swiftie in this group.
No.
It's fine. I got it. Women like hunting witches too.
David poses an interesting question. It's like, what is the frame here? There's two really cool things about that. One is that David posed an interesting thing. So
Woo!
We should all sit and all
Drink.
Sit.
Whenever I pose an interesting question or make a good point, I think we should all drink.
Right.
Finally, I got one. Drink.
And for our tens of listeners, I would really appreciate it if you immediately go to the website and send in congratulations to David. We really want to build up his confidence.
Should encourage.
But the issue is, how do we frame this? How do we look at it? And I think you just set it up beautifully, that we have two parents, and those parents, and we're going to call them red and blue, and I don't care how you assign the sex to that, but red and blue are the parents, and the American people, us, are the children in between. And yes, this is the equivalent of mom slapping dad, dad calling mom terrible names, and us kids sitting around the table trying to just pretend it's not happening and eating our mashed potatoes and containing our own emotions. So I think that actually is a really good frame, and I think it leads us to talking maybe a little bit about family systems
totally not
theory.
Based off of a reality that I lived through with my childhood.
So, fine bourbon and aged trauma today on Shrink the Nation.
Everyone asks, why did you become a psychiatrist? I'll just start pointing them to our show.
Exactly. Self-revelation is almost impossible when you put enough hours on a podcast. All right. So who wants to talk about family systems theory? Who wants to tell us all about Murray Bowen?
I think it's you, Rob.
All right. Yeah, I'll pour words into the void. Murray, a guy who did most of his work in the 50s and 60s, he developed a theory about families that he called family systems theory. So when you think of a family, it's tempting, I suppose, to think of the elements of the families. And we're going to stick with a heteronormative frame, as Allison likes to remind me each time. But in that frame, there is a mom, there is a dad, there are kids. And we can even get a little more detailed. There's the youngest, the middle child, the oldest child. And we can think of them in those terms. And we often do. That if we're talking about our family, we'll say, my spouse or my wife or my husband. We'll talk about my youngest or my oldest. So we talk about elements. But Murray Bowen, and I love the name Murray. I've never met a Murray in the real world, but I hope to. So Murray, he thought about it in terms of a system that in these families, they are so emotionally integrated or enmeshed that instead of a group of individuals, what you instead have is an entity. The family is an entity, it's a system. And that system has its own emotions, its own coping mechanisms, its own energy, own internal forces, and behaves accordingly. That's the background, the basis. And then some of the hit points that he identified in a family are concepts like triangulation, emotional cutoff, that families can have low or high differentiation. And then he also talked a lot about multi-generational transmission, that certain coping patterns, certain anxieties, fears, relational patterns were passed down kind of like heirlooms from one generation to the next generation and held on to, even though they were no longer really relevant in the present. So when I think about that theory, I think there is a lot that we can do to apply it to what's going on right now.
Good for you.
Let's start with triangulation.
Yeah.
All right. So triangulation is when in that system, and it's usually mom and dad. And so mom and dad end up pulling a child up into the conversation so that they don't have to deal with it. So they can use them as a go-between. Or they can also scapegoat a child and blame the problems of the family on the child. Or it can be the one parent and the kids triangulating the other parent as being the bad one and the scapegoat. But it does seem very relevant to me to our current system in that they're red and blue and say the American people are the kids. But there's other examples.
Yeah. So if we were to look at this from a national political perspective, we can think about in recent memory, this happened a lot between Congress and the president using the court system to triangulate instead of either one making specific decisions, student loan forgiveness. So 22-23, instead of cutting a deal with Congress, the White House tried using the one-time cancellation using the HEROES Act. So states sued, at which point the Supreme Court killed the plan in Biden v. Nebraska and then said that the administration had overstepped. And so you'll see these times where instead of Congress trying to legislate something that they didn't want to be involved in, i.e., making a change that they would have felt would have been publicly unpopular, they decided to sue to bring the court in to make the court make a decision that wasn't specific to what the challenge was, but more in the act that the president was making at the time, in that he was overstepping his bounds. Not that they didn't like what he was doing, but that he didn't have the power to do it. And so there was triangulation there.
We see clinically that is really interesting. A popular thing on social media currently is the parentified child. So that's also somebody who gets pulled into decision making when they don't want to. They have this huge burden of responsibility, and it feels like they have to carry their entire family. They have to manage the siblings. They have to manage their parents. What happens is then when they come into my office, they are perfectionistic messes who cannot continue to juggle everything anymore. And usually by the time I see somebody, their lives are falling apart. And it's a matter of talking them through how to put all of the responsibilities down so they can pick out what is important to them and what fits with their values to continue doing. And it's a really hard process. People really do not want to give up all of that responsibility that's been put on them for a really long time.
And often when they get to that point, when they do put it down, they put it down in a dramatic fashion. They act out in a dramatic fashion that everyone's like, that's not the person I know. And they're dumping all their responsibilities at once. And actually, I think this connects really well to the courts, that in this concept of triangulation, our politicians have failed to manage their responsibilities. The red and the blue in Congress are not passing the laws to get at the problems of the United States. And instead of passing those laws, they have gone to the courts and they have put a strain on the courts to resolve things that are really about laws and about fixing it from the law standpoint, changing the system, but they put it on the courts. So what's happening to the courts right now? They're overloaded. They're asked to make too many choices and make too many calls. So what we're seeing is them becoming more and more disengaged. They are allowing things that at one time they probably wouldn't have allowed, and it's getting freer and freer because it's too much responsibility for them. They're dropping it.
Well, to add to that too, what's happening is instead of making specific legislative decisions through the legislative branch, they're asking the judicial branch to weigh in on the constitutionality of decisions that are being made either through the executive branch or at lower levels. What's happening there is triangulation is pointing the finger at the judicial branch for outcomes that people don't necessarily like. So we, the people, the children, and really it's not even a red or blue, mom and dad, it's three adults who are fighting this out. It's two of the adults triangulating in the third one. And now the people are starting to get upset at the third adult who is trying to make these decisions, the judicial branch, because they're being asked to weigh in on things that they usually aren't asked to weigh in on. But there's a lot more nuance to the questions that they're being asked than we understand or that we choose to understand. And they're very narrow questions as to, is this constitutional? What I find really fascinating is that no matter what the outcome, there's quite a bit of spin that ends up happening that ends up getting passed along as well. And so it could be a 7-1 decision, not in your favor, and it's where we won. But it could also be a 5-4 decision in your favor, and we're upset because we didn't get and it's a very interesting way to create more responsibility on this third branch and to make them make decisions that they don't want to be making. And a lot of times they try really hard not to be making these decisions, but at the same time, and we'll see this often, allude to how they might make that decision a little bit differently in the future if you present the case a little bit differently. Again, upsetting the people who are paying attention. It's fucked, I'd say is the medical term.
Yeah. So, again, when we started this, our idea was not so much, we can all step back and say, all right, it's fucked, it's broken. But the psychology behind it fundamentally ends up coming back. And if we trace it backwards, it comes back to a broken Congress that go back to the 90s when Congress started to break. A future show, we can talk about the dynamics that led to that maybe. But when Congress broke, and they ceased to be mom and dad. When red and blue ceased to be mom and dad that made decisions and actually took care of the family, then it forced the executive branch to make some changes. And that started with Bill Clinton. It continued on with Bush. It continued on with Obama, and it has continued on. And it has amplified. In fact, it has amplified over time, in which the executive branch had to make more decisions. They had to utilize the power that was within their grasp to get shit done because Congress wasn't. And now we've got to the point where now the courts are getting pulled in, that the courts are now being asked, make decisions that fix things, and it's beyond them. That's not what they do. What they do is they rule on the constitutionality of the laws that the legislative branch is supposed to apply, and then the executive branch is supposed to carry out. But what they're being asked to do is fix problems, solve these arguments. So they're the mediator, basically, that we're in divorce mediation, just like from the scene from Wedding Crashers, and each side is screaming at the other. Rebecca De Mornay and Dwight Yoakam were the two actors that were in that scene, and it starts it out, and she screams, "Shut your mouth when you're talking to me."
We all need a Vince Vaughn in our lives to solve this. That's what we need. We need Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson to come here and fix this problem.
Absolutely. And they worked it out beautifully. They were able to, I mean, of course, it's a movie, but they were able to find the emotional through line for those two characters. And, Rebecca De Mornay got the flight miles. Good for her.
It's all that matters. It's all that matters.
Okay. So you also talked about low and high differentiation.
Okay. So in these family systems, the options are for folks to take on along a spectrum, obviously, but say low differentiation is a poor sense of self, a poor sense of identity as a human, as an individual, and giving over that identity to the family. So the family becomes the identity. Whereas a high differentiated family is a family that's healthy enough that each element of the family can still maintain their sense of identity. And clinically, I'm sure you guys can speak toward that and what you've seen with families and systems.
Oh my gosh. So then a low differentiation family would be rejecting to outsiders who didn't automatically comply with the expected values, behaviors, appearance. If they didn't match, they would be ostracized pretty quickly. And a high differentiation family would be able to say, oh my gosh, we're so glad that you're from a completely different area of the world. How interesting. We're so glad with what new things that you bring to our family.
Absolutely.
Huh. I wonder if there's any national reflection there. I don't know, maybe with immigration or just compliance in general or adherence to certain expectations of gender conformity.
If we look at just how things are being dealt with the budget standoff, pretty low differentiation, right? Reactive, fussy, blamey. When you're only willing to go on your friendly media, only repeating purity slogans, putting big signs that blame the other side, which everybody's doing right now. It's the Republicans' government shutdown. It's the Democrats' government shutdown. Treats any disagreement within as betrayal, frames all concessions as a moral collapse, and then uses the court of public opinion to try to punish the other side, saying, well, it's fine that we're having a budget. We're going to have a shutdown because this is the other side's fault and blah, blah, blah. Whereas in a high differentiation world, which we do not live in, unfortunately, nationally, we might have behaviors where they're willing to meet the opponent directly, willing to name some of the trade-offs out loud, separate people from positions, refusing to use dehumanizing language publicly or really at all, let's be honest,
Mm-hmm.
explains the cost of their own plan and then takes the heat without mirroring it, willing to allow that anxiety kind of spread out and let it lower, having workable compromises. This is the world we used to live in when we'd have these budgetary compromises to the point where you would say, we're not going to get everything. And I'm talking decades ago, not
Mhm.
not years ago, but decades ago, where they would say, I'm with you on goals, not on this method. Here's my yes, here's my no, compromise. And I think that was the Congress that we grew up with to some extent. And then now it's, if you're not with us, you're against us. That's the low differentiation
Mm-hmm.
world that we live in, unfortunately.
And with this family system theory, so there are the internal energies and forces that are happening. There's also external. So the external forces, such as economic factors or other crises that a family is going to be faced with that come from the outside. So there's the crises that come from the inside and the crises that come from the outside. And if we go backwards, and this is part of the reason why I find this so fascinating from a national standpoint, if we go backwards in time, some of those crises can actually be unifying for a family. You can take a sick family, give it an external crisis, and they come together beautifully.
Mhm.
And if we look backwards in time, there are points in our history in which our mom and dad, where red and blue, came together beautifully to face an external crisis. And a lot of the dissension disappeared because they unified to face that external crisis. So if we go back from 1945 or from 1940 forward, that external crisis of World War II unified us. And, we can go back and look at the history. And I'm not a historian.
Wait, aren't we supposed to drink when you say that?
I think so. It's
Drink.
gotten to the point that so many things that when I say it, but it's not that there weren't dissenting voices then. There were lots of people that complained that FDR was a king in the making. However, mostly they unified against an external force. And then if we trace that out through history, there have been periods where the external forces were divisive or the external forces were such that the internal forces took over. So think through the 60s into the early 70s, there were lots of internal forces that caused more divisiveness. And then we had periods of quiescence in the 70s, 80s, right up to the mid 90s, in which there wasn't more of a unifying force. This is the time where politicians used to reference my friend across the aisle, and they ceased doing that. And that's where we're at right now. We do have, if I go back to, like, say, the 80s for Democrats, for the blue side, there used to be a coalition in which there were lots of voices that lived along a spectrum. And somehow they tolerated one another and they lived together and they made it work. And then somewhere along the line, the forces changed where the blue side could not tolerate the extreme of their party. They could not tolerate the conservative Democrats, which used to exist. It became something different and they wouldn't tolerate it. That's an example of a low differentiated family. And then we can say the same on the red side, that right now we have a very low differentiated family. You're either with us 100%, all in on every aspect, or you're not with us. You're against us. And that's what's happened to the red and the blue. And then that puts us in the middle where we have to make a choice. And I don't like so much of what they believe in, but I got to be on that side or other side. And this happens in families. Mom and dad, kids have to take a side if mom and dad put them in a position to take a side. And they're going to select, even they might hate part of how mom's behaving or dad's behaving, they got to select the side that's going to protect them. And here we sit, American people, selecting a side that they feel in their heart is going to protect them.
Bleak.
Yeah, I'm usually the bummer, Rob.
I don't think it's sad. I think it's coming to an understanding of what's going on, and then it gives us an option to actually work at it.
I think, which might lead us to our next point, the emotional cutoffs. At a certain point, it doesn't feel like it's worth it to work on it. So if we're talking about the divorce, that emotional cutoff of just being done. So if you are with someone who is unsafe for you to be with, there is a time that comes where it is like you just have to say it's done. And I do think that for a lot of people in this country, immigrants, gender nonconforming minorities do not feel safe any longer and have been used as the scapegoat in these scenarios. So they're like the bad kid. Somebody else gets to be the golden child, but they have to be the bad kid and then get blamed. And then the choices from there also look like, I guess it could be cut off, but it also is like self-preservation at a certain point as well.
When you bring that up, the way that I think about that is the same way that I think about with like family therapy. You come in and there's usually that person who is the scapegoat within the family that's sort of being blamed for all of the problems. And everybody's really focusing in on that person within the therapy. And it's the role of the therapist to just kind of get everybody to keep talking and keep just opening up and discussing what's going on. And what you ultimately end up finding out nearly all of the time is that it's not that one person who is the issue. It is everybody collectively who's got issues, who's got problems. It's the dynamic of the family that's really causing problems. The one person may be the focus, but they're not the driving factor, right? They're just a symptom of the bigger problem that is the family. When you're talking about maybe it's just not worth it to keep dealing with this for these groups, geez, I can't help but I understand it. I get where if you live within those demographics, you might feel that way. But the way that I see it, the way that I envision it is that when we're talking about mom and dad as being red and blue, as being Congress, as being the executive branch, as being the judicial branch, all of those people are replaceable. All of them. Every last one of them. And so right now, yes, they are existing within a system that is perpetuating this constant fighting and bickering and bitching and blaming and triangulation and everything. And they're doing that. But we, the people, are watching this mortified and saying, gosh, what can we do about this? And I guess that's just it. In this situation, what is unique is that rather than calling for this divorce where we're getting dragged into which parent are we going to run off with? Which side, which red or blue? Which of these two shitty parents am I going to get to spend 50% of my time, Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays this week? And which of the other shitty parent, when really we the people can be saying, screw the divorce. Let's get rid of the parents that are causing this problem. Let's divorce them and let's get better parents. Let's replace the people creating the problem. Let's go ahead and vote all of them out. The people that have learned to use media and social media to triangulate, the people who are refusing to legislate, the people who are refusing to do the one thing they were elected to do, which is come up with laws, not take a whole shit ton of money from lobbyists, special interests or anything, not spend all of your time getting reelected. We don't give a shit about that. What I care about is, are you representing me the way that I want to be represented. And to be honest with you, I don't think any of our representatives or senators are representing us very well because they're not fucking doing anything.
That plays into one other of old Murray's perspectives on this is the multi-generational transmission process. It's kind of the equivalent of, I guess, inheriting great-great-grandma's meatloaf recipe. So great-great-grandma's meatloaf recipe comes down through the generations, but we get to the present and there's some of the ingredients that were available to great-great-great-grandma that no longer available. The times just changed, and you can't get that special ingredient that really made the meatloaf worthy of transmission down through the generational line. Now what you have is something that just sucks. It just tastes awful, but you keep making it because great-great-grandma made it, but you don't have all the ingredients to make it. And in the equivalent here, multi-generation transmission process, that's inheriting relational patterns, problem-solving techniques, stress management tools from prior generations, and then trying to implement them into your life. From my Appalachian background standpoint, this would be the equivalent of moonshine and shotguns to resolve relationship problems. That if I took that moonshine shotgun approach to my current life, it would be a nightmare. It would be awful. And we're doing that with politics, that we have inherited this pattern, this system, this relationship dynamic, how to manage these kind of stressors that have come down to us generation after generation after generation. And now it's in an environment of social media, 24-hour news cycle. And that old way of doing it, which we're still trying to do, like we did before, it just doesn't work now. It just isn't functional at this particular juncture. And there's the problems that we do have this system, and the system is sick, and mom and dad aren't making decisions anymore. And the kids are put in a rough position and having to choose a side and make decisions that benefit the family or absorb them. And here we sit with this messy ball of bad meatloaf.
Yeah, I don't want to spend my time with either of them at this point. I guess that's just it, is screw having two Christmases. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get stiffed by both of them. Neither one of them is going to pick me up after school because they're both shitty parents. They're both going to forget me.
Right.
We're going to have to do this ourselves anyway. So can we just get better parents? They deserve each other.
I do think we have the court enabling bad behavior. With Citizens United, all of the money that's coming into campaigns now has really shifted the ability for small, real people to get elected anymore. It's really difficult unless they're backed by huge donors. And usually, even if it's your small local district, that money comes from outside in big ways that makes being an actual local person really difficult to get elected.
Now, I have a little more empathy for the courts than you seem to. I think they were asked to solve problems. They were asked to make choices that they never should have been asked to make. They had to make them, they had to identify something and put a document that is 250 years old on the line and make a call. They went with something that was firmer than it actually should have been because they had no choice, that they had a bad set of options. They were asked a question they shouldn't have been asked. And then they had to do something that they felt was going to be replicatable, internally consistent, which becomes more and more and more a shadow of a nuanced decision and something that is much more primitive and black and white. So they said, corporations are people. Now, nuance says, well, that's stupid. But if you're stuck and you're the one you have to say yay or nay, then you got to say yay or nay. And that yay ended up being corporations are people.
There's a lot of nuance that goes to the judicial system. And so I think it would be impossible for us to cover that in one talk.
Oh, yeah.
Also, we're not lawyers. We're not judges.
not.
We're not legislators. We're not elected. But the role of a judge is should be to call balls and strikes, right? Is to take the law and apply it as they see it. The problem being a lot of times is that there's a lot of gray area that can exist. But when there is black and white, they should be able to call it based upon what's there. It is the legislative branch, whether that is nationally or at a state level. It's their job to come up with the laws, and then it is the judge's job to apply that law appropriately. I think people do get confused or mixed up. They will sort of over apply the Supreme Court and the various levels of courts and not really look at what they're all doing individually, because I would say you can't really generalize to say all of them are doing perfectly or all of them are doing terribly. They all have different roles, and they also play a role within a system. And when the system's not working, they're going to have a harder time doing their job. Realize too, with the appeal system that works, you can see multiple layers of appeal that will say, no, this doesn't apply. No, this doesn't apply. No, this doesn't apply. And then have the Supreme Court say, nah, it's fine. The challenge that you see lately is that the way that the Supreme Court of how they're viewing cases is not always consistent and has not been for a bit. And this is where I start getting lost, whether it's like textualism. They're not always doing it consistently. And that is where some people get very upset because they're not seeing it applied the same way for all the same cases. And that is where one side is getting very upset. The other side, on the other hand, is very happy to see that because it's working out very well in their favor at times. But you can see where, again, them getting pulled in to even answer those questions isn't always appropriate, but they're getting asked to do it and probably shouldn't be.
They shouldn't be. We can identify these structural problems and these tensions, but then when we get to this divorce concept, that is absolutely emotional cutoff. That is saying, I give up. I am separating myself either emotionally or physically from this system. And clinically, I know I've seen this, and particularly Allison, you've done so much more psychotherapy than I, particularly in the last, 10 years.
And she's doing so great.
Shut up.
Guys, she's doing great.
She's
She's
just
a girl
doing
boss.
great.
100%. The stressor of the moment ends up coloring the perception of history and the perception in a family. So I'll see folks come in and they have a crisis and they want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. That ultimately, it's a good family. It's a decent relationship. It is not perfect because none of them are. But because of the crisis of the moment, the solution is emotional cutoff and moving forward. When the overall system actually was really good, it's just a matter of plussing things up and fixing things. And that's the hard work. That's the shadow work. That's digging in. And we have no choice that the history of this nation is rich and nuanced and actually much better than the bad side. That we've done great for millions and millions and millions of people have lived a better life because of the United States, because the opportunities it provided in the grand scheme, that we have done more good than harm.
I'm dying. We invented the transatlantic slave trade. America is
And I'll
built
still stand
on-
by that for the greater good, the idea of democracy, the ideals of our nation, that is part of our shadow. There is no doubt. But how many people lived a life that was closer to freedom, to success, to living their actual individuality because of us as compared to if we not had existed? Slave trade probably would have been invented regardless. But in the grand scheme, the United States has done more good for more people than harm. It's done a lot of harm. We're back to the shadow, and we're back to this idea of splitting off. We're good or we're bad, and we're not. We're something in between, but we're probably more good than bad.
Allison's going to start shotgunning chocolate-covered bananas real soon.
I'm going to lose
Case in
my
point,
mind.
the fact that you can shotgun chocolate-covered bananas.
I know. I don't know how much longer me and Trader Joe are going to be able to keep this up if we lose all our banana supply. But no, I am glad that banana republics, I guess, exist and let me have bananas. But I would gladly go without if our nation didn't overthrow other governments. I'm a little bit shady on what's the word for like when you can't remember something, on what actually a
Hazy?
banana republic is.
Dementia?
Hazy. I think I come from this as a person who's a real big fan of divorce, actually, just like huge fan. I will remind everybody I have been married almost 20 years. We haven't gotten divorced, but
Yes.
I think, I know, what have I admitted to on this podcast?
Some serious
A
shit.
rent-to-own couch that got repoed, whatever else I was up to.
Infidelity, theft,
Philandering.
substance.
Pilfering.
Hey, it's Rob from Shrink the Nation. As my friend David so eloquently states at the beginning of the show, we are clinicians, but we're not your clinician. We love to joke around and dive into the tough topics, but there's something really important we need to say. If you're struggling with your mental health or facing substance use issues, we want you to know you're not alone. We have dedicated our professional careers to mental health, and we care deeply about it. It's okay to ask for help. Reaching out to a professional in your area could be the first step toward feeling better. Don't wait. There's support out there, and it works. Please take that first step. We want you to be well. Now let's get back to the show. Oh, and don't tell David I said he was eloquent. He'll be insufferable.
I do think that divorce can absolutely be life-saving. Like, the numbers back that up, that with no fault divorce, domestic violence or intimate partner violence decreased. So I don't know what that would look like for America, but I think if America had the ability to walk away, that might be something. But no, we're stuck.
Yeah, I think it looked like the
we're
Civil
stuck.
War was
Civil
the last
War.
time it was tried.
I gotta say that the outcome of that, a lot of people died, but we were able to get rid of slavery.
I don't know, Allison. So it cost a lot of lives. It also brought some resolution to a deep, deep, deep wrong that is part of our shadow. So it brought resolution to that. What it didn't resolve is all the downstream consequences from it. And it didn't certainly bring back the generations of people that would have lived and would have contributed and would have had a life had it not been for the Civil War. So the idea of a national divorce, a nation divided cannot stand.
It was less a divorce than a divorce that almost happened that then had a mediation, a really nasty mediation that then
It's a
ended
really
up
rough
not
mediation.
having.
That was not very effective.
No, it
either.
did. There ended up not being a divorce, so the mediation there ended up not being. You know, when you talk about divorce, when that does happen, there's the option for a clean divorce, i.e., the two sides sort of agree to go their separate ways and just kind of do, divide their assets and do whatever and just amicably divorce. And then there's the
I'm sorry to interrupt. Gwyneth Paltrow calls that conscious uncoupling. It's really important to put in there right there. Okay. Her and Chris Martin, Coldplay.
Yeah.
he's caused some conscious uncoupling recently, huh?
He did.
Then there's the messier version. How this plays in, it actually does end up some level of triangulation where you're then asking a third party person, the judiciary, to start making decisions because you're not willing to yourself or you're not willing to compromise. So you're saying, hello, person who doesn't know me at all. You divide my assets. You make these decisions about my life moving forward using the boundaries of the law to some extent, but also now what? I'm so pissed off at the other person and vice versa that we're just going to go along with whatever you say, but then expect, and I think people expect that third party person, the judge, is going to hear something that's going to then bring them on their side. And I don't think that happens too often. I think the judge hears these two people can't fucking get it together, and you're gonna divide the assets in the middle, right? Like, it's just gonna divide it.
And the judge isn't emotionally disengaged from it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I don't think it's helpful for us to approach this as if it's an abusive relationship. There are some relationships that need to end because they're violence. This is not what we're talking about. We can't approach it from that angle. It pulls it too far to the extreme. That what we're in the middle here. In the middle is we have a dysfunctional parental relationship. We're on the ragged edge of the frontier, and we don't have a choice but to stay together. What the choices that we have is how do we make it work? And we have seen it work. There have been points where we have worked. We have come together and we have overcome huge challenges and we have maintained the integrity and safety of the household. So I don't know if pulling it to, I mean, you're a fan of divorce, but I think what I just took from what you said, that's in the context of a abusive, violent, dangerous, whether it be emotionally or physically, environment. And yes, there are some environments that just need to dissolve. That's not this one. And I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater on this because there are points in history where we have achieved something closer to our ideal. And everyone has benefited from it. There are lots of points in history, as Allison's going to next point out, in which we have fallen short.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, but packaging that as the priority, that's the thing that we really need to strive for, to focus on, I think is dangerous. And I think that's what's happening with this idea that we can divorce.
That's exactly why we're even talking about it, is that it keeps getting brought up as if it's a reasonable option or it's something that should be considered, when the reality is it's triangulation. It's sides pitting us against ourselves rather than dealing with one another appropriately. That's really what we are calling out. That's what we're seeing. And that's what I want everyone to understand, is that when whoever gets on TV, gets on Twitter, gets on somewhere, and they start making these wild statements about the other side being impossible to deal with, they're just pitting you against the other person, and instead of dealing with it themselves. If that's your congressperson that you elected to office, you didn't elect them to cross their arms and refuse to deal with the other side. You elected them to go there and come up with solutions, right? I think that's what we did.
I think a lot of people are laboring to live under people that they did not vote for. I think that is a big struggle. But yeah, I think that's should be the answer, is to vote the people out that are not helpful and that should be doing the work. And I also think that my job on this podcast is to be the person who annoyingly points out that for some people, this is an abusive relationship. For some people who are being snatched out of the streets, who are being held with no due process, for people whose medical care is being denied, who aren't allowed to use public restrooms, for all of these people, for me as a human woman to have my right to bodily autonomy and healthcare be denied, that's an abusive relationship. So I just have to, it's my job to point out those annoying things to the two of you.
They're not annoying. They're very real. It's just, it still feels like splitting to me. It's still taking it to the extreme. And when you're on that side of it, and that, I think that's part of the struggle with dealing with a nation in internal conflict, is that the scope of our lives is short. The national life is long. So we're living through a period in which, in our life, it occupies a massive amount of our time. That this is what we get to experience. In the national life, this is a phase that will resolve itself. It will work its way out. It's just going to work its way out on a time scale that we might not get to enjoy. That we're not making decisions for our best. We're making decisions for our grandchildren's best. And that's a challenge. And in this moment, because our life is narrow and our life is short, it is existential. But in the scope of the nation, it's not. And in the scope of the nation, there's a history of goodness and positivity and good things that come from the United States historically that I want my grandbabies to have. And I'm not willing to throw it out at this particular juncture because I'm not going to get to live that. I hope they get to live it.
And I disagree with both of you.
Good.
And here's why. Because I think the perspective that I take on this is that nothing that is being dealt with is something that can't be overcome. I don't think we're relegated to, we can't improve this and we can't improve this quickly. But I also don't want to fall into the trap of only focusing on these issues that are being made on one side as being, well, we can't possibly deal with the other side because of these issues that Allison is talking about. The reason is because I think all of us are being played completely by the system that is working very, very well for the people that it's working well for, and not working well at all for everybody else, but we're all pawns. And so when we talk endlessly about social media and echo chambers, I mean that wholeheartedly. I've been watching our own social media, and you know what we have? We have a troll farm. That's what we have. Whenever we post something, I have, to this day, I've seen maybe one positive comment from anybody, and that was only after responding to somebody's negative comment in a way that wasn't negative, which we never do. We don't respond negatively. But all that happens is people pop out of the woodwork and they come up with bullshit, complete negative garbage to anything that we post. whether it's in just jabs at the other side. It's just trolling. All it is, it's just trolling. And when we look at even this right now, the government shutdown, you have two sides that are absolutely unwilling to work with the other side. One side feels that they're doing right by their people by standing up for healthcare. The other side feels like they're doing right by their people by not giving in to healthcare, and blaming the other side. They're both blaming the other side, but neither one of them is willing to acknowledge who it's actually hurting, which is everybody else, because the people who are unwilling to work through this aren't getting hurt at all. It's all the rest of the people. I see people who are taking advantage of everyone else and saying, look, we can use this to score more points. And both sides are doing this. They're saying, we can score points. And you know what? It's working. At the end of the day, the people who are getting hurt are all the people who require those services.
It's Rob. Rob's being hurt right now.
Rob is being hurt.
We can't hurt Rob.
No, I'm literally being hurt right now.
But the point is, it's all of us, the pawns, we're being used to fight about shit that, whether it affects us or not, the vast majority of people, it doesn't affect. But they are saying, I am upset about this. And they're being dragged down these rabbit holes because they're using social media. They're weaponizing these systems. And it's working so fucking well. And they're making so much money to do it. And what I think is, yes, we can fix this, but they need champions of that change to say, they're all fucking with you. All of them. Every last one of them. Get off the social media. Stop going down these rabbit holes. Start talking to people. Stop hyper-focusing on these niche things and start focusing on what is going to work for all of us all the time. And so that's my perspective, but
yeah,
tear it apart.
So I'm curious, in
More
this
Jeffersons.
national divorce, who gets to own bourbon?
Kentucky.
Yeah. Canada's having a real hard time with the tariffs because they can't get their Kentucky bourbon.
They can't get their Kentucky bourbon. Now, for our tens of listeners, just to be clear, it does not have to be made in Kentucky in order to be considered bourbon. It has to be made in the United States. So, I mean, the reality of it, and this is what always strikes me, it's just such a non-nuanced idea because we're not really red states and blue states. We're purple states. You know, on any street in America, there's red and there's blue and there's many different shades in between that exist as neighbors. So the idea that we could gerrymander some weird national thing that comes out of a divorce is ridiculous. And the idea that we could come out the other side, the GDP gets cut in half. Who gets the military? What bases go where? What equipment goes where? And which soldiers go to which side? How do we continue to defend ourselves? All the nuances. Who has to take Florida? My God, who wants Florida?
Florida.
No way, man.
Who gets Disney?
Who gets Disney? Who owns
We
this?
want Marvel, though. Come on now. Who has to take DC?
We all love the new Superman. That's the best.
It was good. I enjoyed it.
I'm not a DC fan.
I liked it too, Allison.
It was excellent. David, with all your... I don't even know who that is. Is that Loki?
Hawkeye.
Ugh,
So
gross.
I thought the new Superman hit all the right emotional tones, and I thought it was a very comic book plot. So yeah, it's a comic book.
We see the cutout
super
behind you,
ridiculous.
and we notice the wearing.
Well,
and all
every
the-
night I go to sleep saying a prayer to David Corn Sweat.
So glad he's back.
Oh, we brought him back. We brought him back, baby. Corn Sweat's back in the game.
He's the best Superman in a long time. No joke.
He's good. He's good. So just the idea of it, it's not even a feasible thing. And the idea that any side comes out the other side better, stronger, more capable, or even more unified. It's not that. What we're doing is, again, it's shadow surgery. It's cutting out what we think is bad and thinking we're going to come out the other side a fuller human, a fuller individual. We are not. We would come out so much less than in so many ways that the downstream consequences cannot even be adequately imagined by how much less than we would be than the unified United States that we have right now. And I don't want Florida. I don't want it. I don't want to take care of it. I don't want to pay child support for it. I just don't. It's got a mullet. It's wearing a tank top. I mean, it probably drives an El Camino.
Stop. Don't say anything bad about El Caminos. That's the best of all cars, except for the Subaru Baja. That's the El Camino of Subarus.
My God. And that is what emotionally got. So Allison gets touched on the plight of minority populations and El Caminos. That's
I
her.
freaking love an El Camino. Do you know how close this family was to buying a Subaru Baja? This close.
Right.
So close.
Right. It was that infidelity that had to be dealt with before you could push on with a major purchase.
Can't even buy a real couch.
Yeah, I
Right.
had to pay off the couch first, Rob. Didn't get repoed.
Had to get a used
I concur.
Baja.
How about some prescriptions? How do we fix this, people?
So, okay, I have a very serious one. Open primaries. In order to fix a lot of these issues is to stop electing the craziest of the crazy people. Stop trying to push people all the way to the fringes before they get to the general election. Let the fucking people speak. Let all of us vote in the primaries. Let us decide who's going up and then have our elections. Make people appeal to everybody rather than the fringe.
Absolutely. That's a lovely one. I've never thought of that, David. And that's a wonderful prescription.
I have another one. I have to give credit to Chuck Todd on this one, which is we need to expand our Congress to more accurately reflect our population. We stopped expanding our Congress. It's been a while since we should have something like 800 congressmen and women at this point. Rather than having one person represent a few million people, we should have one person represent 100,000 people so they can better represent the populations that they are seeing so that they can spend more time actually dealing with their population. That would actually help gerrymandering because it would be a lot more difficult to gerrymander and it would allow for much better representation. So expand Congress to better reflect the population, which was something that doesn't require a constitutional amendment. It's just something that Congress can do by just opening up more seats.
Any ideas, Allison?
I mean, not to fix anything. I do have my favorite Supreme Court podcast called 5 to 4. It was been a few years since they named it, and it's just it's a really great history lesson on the history of the Supreme Court. Their tagline is a podcast about how much the Supreme Court sucks. So that gives you the biased going in, but it's a really funny podcast that's also sad because that's on brand for me, the sad part.
So is that a script or you just sort of set a thing?
What, the podcast?
You just set a thing. You're like, I have a podcast that I like.
No,
that's not a prescription. Should we listen to it? Should we not listen to it? Should we avoid? What do you want us to do with said podcast?
It's an offer. This is what I do with all my actual prescriptions too. I'm like, here's the thing. You can do what you want with it. You don't have to take it. It's just an offer.
So my prescription is one, everyone really has to sit with who gets Florida. You really have to consider that who wants ownership of that?
They got those manatees. Those are good.
Well, I mean, there's the good and the bad. So, it's got a mullet, but it makes a mean cheeseburger. So, and you gotta accept it as a whole entity. So, think that one through. Think through who gets bourbon and who gives it up identity wise, and think that one through. But I come back to, and this is just a prescription that comes back over and over and over again, and it is just so serious and it's so implementable, but it is local engagement, that locally get engaged with your neighbors, do good things for your community in some way that puts you face to face with the citizenry, our siblings in this nation. It's so much harder to dislike and to write off people when you're actually engaged with them, talking with them, sharing values. And fundamentally, we get separated on these family value thing, but truthfully, we all have very similar values. And that is, we love who we love. We want to take care of them. We want to be happy and we want them to be happy. And when you are actually engaged with people, it's harder to ignore that. And it's harder to write off that the way someone else might love or the way someone else might derive value is different. So get engaged locally. Do it. And think about Florida, because no one wants it.
People in Florida probably are happy with it.
No one in our tens of listeners is coming out of Florida. No one will ever know that I disparaged Florida.
You think that, but my last one goes back to any episode we talked about social media. Oh my God, get off social media. Check your echo chamber for the love of all that is good. Stop with the trolling. Stop with the hate. Stop being a pawn in the political game that is being played. You are making it so easy for other people to be successful at worsening everybody else's life. Demand more from your elected leaders. And if they're not doing it, stop voting for them.
Give up the idea of a divorce, folks. No, we're going to sit in this room, we're going to be together, and we're going to figure this shit out, period, end of story. As long as there is this evacuation option, which is a myth. There is no evacuation option. We can't punch out of this plane. We're in it together. It's like when I'm waiting to get on an airplane and people are jockeying to be the first to board. I'm like, I'm pretty sure we're all going to land at the same spot at the same time. And if the plane goes down, we all go down together. So we're on the plane, and the idea that somebody can punch out and not affect everybody is just a myth. So anyway,
the way that I think about this is rather than thinking about it from the divorce, because the people talking about divorce are the parents, right? We're all the kids. So whenever the kids were like, I'm going to leave, and you're like, fine, good luck finding better parents. We all have the opportunity to find better parents. So how about we all just make a commitment to one another to find better parents? That's all. Let's just collectively, rather than putting up with the shitty parents that keep talking about divorce and dragging us down with them and their horrible life choices, let's just get better parents, because this is the one time that we get to choose who the parents are. How fortunate we are. This is it. This is the only time that we get to do that. So let's all choose better parents.
Good deal.
I love it. I can get behind that.
Let's
Absolutely.
do that.
We found one thing.
That's great.
One thing that Allison's in agreement. Okay.
Awesome. Okay.
One of the reasons I like doing this is because it does subject me to different viewpoints and perspectives that I might not otherwise come on. So, Allison, thank you very much. I appreciate you tolerating us and lending your voice, even though I adamantly disagree on every point. No, I don't. Actually.
Every single one.
No, I don't. I don't, not at all. But thank you very much for our tens of listeners. Please subscribe to the newsletter. I would put it out weekly. I promise it's once a week unless the world ends, and then there will be 2. Subscribe, and remember that there is the ability to send questions, comments from our webpage, and it's totally anonymous, and I swear that's true. You can send what your thoughts are, and we would value them.
All right, smash that subscribe, hit like, go to our socials, and it is self-fertilizing on the troll farm. So have at it. Apparently, everyone else is. Have fun. Cue up that music, and we are out.